Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome an incredible new guest to you, Marissa Rodriguez. Welcome to the podcast, Marissa.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you along for the ride today as one of our guest mentors for our Monday mentorship sessions episodes. And you are living in Greece. Tell me how, we were talking off air, but tell me and the audience, how the heck did you end up in Greece? It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, I'm from Puerto Rico, born and raised, moved to New York City at the age of 18 to go to NYU, was doing the New York City thing for a little over 20 years, and COVID hit. I was already in e-commerce. I was already a solopreneur working on my own, but COVID changed the game, right? All of a sudden, everything became very normal to do video calls with clients. You didn't have to go into people's offices anymore. And I took that as an opportunity to do a little traveling. And so I decided to go to Greece on what I thought would be a 10-day trip by myself because I had never traveled alone. This was like a coming of age pilgrimage moment for me, and stayed 101 days. Literally overstayed my visa, the 90-day allotment that you're allowed to be there as an American citizen, and came back to New York, broke my lease, packed up my life, and moved. So literally stepped foot June 25th, 2021, and moved December 27th, 2021. And I've been living here ever since.
Wow, exciting. And now presumably you've got residency in Greece, yeah?
I'm still on something called a digital nomad visa.
Right.
Which is, I was like the first person in the New York City at the consulate to apply. It's a great opportunity for anybody that can do it. There's no tax implications, and you get to just live here without having tax residency here.
Wow. And how long does that visa last, and is it renewable?
It's a 1 to 2 year program. It is renewable. So I'm now in the process of renewing it. I was 2 years in limbo when they were like, here's a piece of paper, you can be here, but we're like working on your renewal. And so that's where I'm at. But it's a great opportunity for anybody. And when I knew that was even a possibility, I took that as a sign. Because how else would I be able to live in Europe as an American working for myself without a company sponsoring a visa? Not necessarily sure that I want a golden visa or buy a property or that kind of investment. And it's just like all of these little things that have been happening in the world, I feel like the last few years, that have opened up so many possibilities for people like me and so many people. So why not take advantage of it?
I love it. And now you have deep experience in retail, e-commerce. You've held senior CMO, COO positions with brands in retail, in e-commerce, etc. And that's the pedigree that you come to the table with as an independent consultant. And now you are the founder and CEO of Through Experience, which is an e-commerce consultancy. And your tagline is scale your e-commerce business without Amazon, wholesale, or retail. That is a catchy catchphrase. I like that as a consultant. So when you say that, how did you decide on the angle that you were going to take as an independent consultant? How did you decide this, A, that this is what I want to do? I want to go off as an independent, and B, how did you decide the sort of tack that you want to take? Because all consultants have to have their own sort of angle. They have to have their own shtick, so to speak, or their own tagline that really sets them apart and differentiates themselves in the market. I know mine was doubling down on B2B because there's not a lot of specialists in the B2B world. And so that's the angle that I took, and that's the blue ocean space I found in the industry as an independent consultant after being in the industry for 25 years. How did you decide the angle that you wanted to take as an independent?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in 2015, January 5th, 2015, I was literally on vacation with my family in Puerto Rico on my dad's boat. And I got a phone call from my then CEO. I was working at a company called Sea Wonder, which was owned by Chris Birch, ex-husband of Tory Burch. And the call came through and Chris is shutting down the business effective immediately. And it was the first time in my adult life that all of a sudden I didn't have a job. And it sent me into a huge sort of like moment of turmoil in my life. I had been following a very traditional path of working for fashion brands and retail brands and had a lot of experience doing wholesale and retail and off price and literally working with every retailer from Bergdorf Goodman to Marmax. And all of a sudden there was this moment of like, what do I actually want to keep doing with my life? New York is very fast paced, right? There's not a lot of time necessarily to think. You're just going and doing. And all of a sudden I had a moment to stop and pause and be like, is this what I want for my life? What do I really want? And I already knew I wanted to be closer to e-commerce. I had that realization in 2007. And I was working in industries that were very slow to adopt or respond at the time. Like in 2009, 2011, most of these retailers and fashion brands did not even have e-commerce websites. They were just starting them up, right? And so I felt like I was always looking for ways where I could do more in e-commerce. And in 2015, I was like, now's my chance. I don't want to continue to climb the corporate ladder. I want autonomy. I want time. I don't want to be stuck in an office for 18 hours a day. And I know that I can do this. And it just so happened that e-commerce was like this small, for a lot of these retailers and a lot of these brands, e-commerce was like a side business, right? It wasn't the main business. And because it was looked at as a side business, I was like, I want to go with people right now that are looking at e-commerce as the business. And so that immediately put me into the world of a lot of startups and a lot of small disruptors and people that were trying to launch as e-commerce only brands or e-commerce, D2C brands. And so that's how I began to really navigate the D2C world. And what I realized was, whoa, this is awesome. All of a sudden, I have direct access to information. I have data and feedback that I didn't have as a wholesaler. I didn't have as a retailer. I didn't have working with businesses that were on marketplaces. And I was just like, there's so much power here. Why would I want to build a business and give somebody else data and give somebody else the power to grow their business when I could take this information and grow the business that I'm working on right now? And so that's how the whole no Amazon, no wholesale, no retail began, because I began to understand like there is power in self-sufficiency. And if I can understand how to get people to buy this product on my own, then I can do anything with that, right? The sky's the limit. And so that's how my love affair with D2C began in 2015. And then I never looked back. I love all these other business models, so I don't want to knock them, but I think that there is something truly incredible about you knowing how to build your own business and your own growth machine.
And how do you continue to find your clients? How did you, because presumably you had to at some point go, when you moved away from being an employee and working in a business to building not only your own business, but your client businesses. And I know that it's, as someone who's gone independent and who's had to build their own pipeline and who's had to build their own personal brand and who's had to form partnerships in the industry and referrals and all those sorts of things, who's had to basically build a pipeline from scratch within my own consultancy. How did you approach the idea that, hey, I'm going to have to, if I don't want to have to run Meta ads and Google ads my own self to drive pipeline for my business and therefore the businesses that I work with, how did you approach that idea of, hey, I'm now out on my own. I don't have a paycheck to rely on here. I'm the master of my own destiny. But the flip side of that, the double-edged sword side of that is I'm now responsible for my own destiny too. How did you approach that?
That's a great question. I think for anyone else, the beginning stages of it are hard. You're dealing with a lot of fear. You're dealing with a lot of mindset, a lot of blocks. My mother cried when I told her I was going to be a consultant. There wasn't like I could point to anyone around me that was doing what I wanted to do. Even in New York City, there was no model for me to be like, I'm going to go work. I'm going to be like that person, because consultants were people that were like at Bain or Accenture or big businesses or like that. Media. Exactly. And I think that the first few months were definitely bumpy because I was not yet really clear. I was still a little afraid. And so there's energetics around that, right? I wasn't necessarily communicating it the right way. I wasn't putting myself out there in the right way. But once I made the decision of, okay, no, I am going on my own. This is happening. And I'm going to be building D2C brands. And I got very clear about that. then the next step for me was also understanding, what does that mean? I want to be launching businesses and I want to be scaling them. So I'm going to be looking for clients that are long-term prospects for me. So the business model that I went into from 2015 until now, right, was I don't need a lot of brands. I just need a few brands that are actually committed, that have everything that I need in order to make it happen. And so it wasn't like I needed to be in a situation of, okay, I need to have a lead gen pipeline, or I need to have a website, or I'm going to be taking 50 calls a week to try to find those people. The crazy thing is, in this, once I made that decision, all of the clients came to me. Like, through referrals of my personal network, without posting on LinkedIn, without doing anything, I ended up getting every single brand that I've worked with. And most of them I've been with, I worked anywhere from 2 years to 6 years. Because if you actually want to create growth, you have to be there long enough to see that happen. And so I stepped into these businesses that were really small. I was dealing with first-time founders. I was dealing often with founders that didn't necessarily have other experiences in e-commerce or retail or wholesale. And I decided, like, I needed to know everything about the e-commerce ecosystem, not just the marketing side of it, but the operations side of it, the people part of it, the tech part of it, the data part of it. If I can become indispensable to this company and to this person, then I don't have to worry about needing new clients all the time. And that was my approach for 9 years, worked quite well. But again, it depends what your definition of success is. I wasn't looking to have a team or an agency. I just was like, I want to make a lot of money myself and have agency and autonomy and do really well for these businesses and these founders. And I want to deliver to them growth machines.
Wow,
And so
incredible.
that was my goal.
What a journey. There's a lot of parallels between your journey and mine. Obviously, I've got a slightly different focus in the sort of ICP that I work with. Our focuses are very similar in the sense that lifestyle was the most important thing to me, as opposed to, I've already run and built agencies. I didn't want to do that again. That was not on my radar, because I tell you, like you, the agency game is tough. You're doing incredible. I did the most hours of work per week on average working in agency land. It's brutal. That's the word I use for it. It's brutal. You'll learn a truckload in a very short period of time. And I definitely got the most learning of my career in the shortest period of time working in and building agencies. But I don't think it's sustainable to do agency side work forever. I think it's just too hard. I think it's physically hard on the body. I think it's mentally and emotionally tough. I just think it's really hard. And so I think I had a similar view on the world to you, which is, I don't want to have a ton of clients. I want to have a few clients that I can really help them move the needle massively and quickly in their business. And I think niching down is a superpower. And I'd love your take on this, because for me, niching, when I very first started my consultancy just over 4 years ago, I was more of a generic e-commerce consultant. And so that meant I would work with D2C brands, B2C brands, B2B brands, didn't really matter, because I've got experience across all those different business models and types and channels. But I've always had a very technical and operational focus in everything I've done in e-commerce for the last 25 years. And what I found is that by being generic, as a generic e-commerce consultant when I first started out, it was 100% red ocean. Every man, woman, and their dog does D2C consulting or B2C consulting. Every agency and their dog does B2C and D2C consulting. And so it felt so red ocean. But when I looked back across my career and I looked at the most interesting projects I was ever involved with, they were all B2B projects, every single one of them. The most complex, the most challenging sales cycles, the most challenging business models, they were all the most challenging tech stacks, the most challenging integrations. They were all in the B2B world. And so I thought, I knew niching down was a superpower, but man, it was scary when 6 months into this new consulting thing, I decided, no, I am going to absolutely 100% niche down on the B2B space, because that's where I'm uniquely skilled, and that's where I uniquely see a blue ocean opportunity. But I tell you, when you start changing everything about your messaging, when you start changing everything about your content, when you start changing everything about your website and your focus and your services and everything, and you pivot down to this niche that you think has the best opportunity for you to uniquely win in and for your clients to uniquely win in. For me, that was friggin' scary. It was, and I've never told this actually, even on my podcast, I've never told this story before because I don't ever operate out of fear. But that was probably one of the scariest things I've ever done because it feels like you're actually closing off opportunities. You're eliminating opportunities. But what I discovered is that when I went all in on this thing that I genuinely, in my heart, believed was the best opportunity for me and my clients, it started to get almost instantaneous traction. The more that I niched down, the more focused that I got, the more traction I got in that space and the more well-known I became in that space. So did you follow a similar path to where you had to really just trust your instinct and say, look, I'm going to go all in on this. And if it doesn't work, then I'll figure something out. Or, hey, if it doesn't work, then I can always go back and work for somebody else again in the future. If I can always get a job if I need to. But it's a little bit scary going all in something that you have a deep belief in.
First of all, there's so much to unpack in what you just said because I think it's so applicable to so many different things. I 100% always tell anyone in e-commerce, for example, the more that you can niche down and speak to one person, what is the solution that you bring? What is the problem that you solve? What is the use case? The better, the stronger. And so I'm an advocate for niching down. I'm also an advocate for the ecosystem of e-commerce. The more that you can rely on weapons that are like sub-specialists in what they do, they are only subject matter experts over one domain, you're going to have better results than when you're working with people that are a jack of all trade or trying to do multiple things at once. I think that the fear of going all in is something that is universal for all of us, right? We do feel like we're leaving money on the table or we're limiting ourselves, or what if we pick the wrong sport, or what if we pick the wrong game, right? When actually it's proven time and time again that it's like, it doesn't really matter what the one thing is. It's the idea that you are showing up daily. It's the idea that you are doing the reps, that you are mastering the fundamentals that is going to separate you from 99% of the population, right? For me, being like, I want to go just all in on D2C in 2015 was super scary because I was also like, where do I find these people? I don't even know where I find this network. But again, I think there's energetics to it. And the minute that I like made that conviction and the minute I started telling people this is what I do now, then all of a sudden people started naturally showing up and appearing. And I think that it's just, you have to stay the course, right? You have to stay the course. You have to like avoid the shiny objects. You have to avoid all of the distractions and the distractors and all of the naysayers and like the peanut gallery that's going to be around you in life that's going to try to tell you like, you should be doing this, you should be doing this. All well-intentioned people, except they're going to give you advice that's going to be counter to mastering one thing and just literally niching down on the one thing that you're going to do better than everybody else.
I love that. I'm glad I'm not the only one. That I've lived in 3 countries now. I was born and raised in California, lived in New Zealand for 28 years, been living in Mexico for the last 2 years. So I definitely don't, I've always been a person that's gone against the grain in terms of the traditional path in life. Didn't get married until I was well into my 40s. And my wife and I don't want to have kids. My wife's a Kiwi. We don't live in our home countries. We live in now a third country. And so I've never been one to follow the traditional path in any area of my life, but certainly I think, and the funny thing is, before I really hardcore niche down in my own business, that was the advice I was giving to my clients too. It's easier the smaller the niche, the easier it is to dominate it, right? So the reality is, this is the advice I've been giving to clients for a long time. But man, when you gotta action that in your own life, and it feels like you're giving up opportunity, you have to have a lot of confidence in what your belief is. You have to have a lot of confidence in that, and that confidence has to be sustained over a long period of time. Because I tell you, when I first did that, it took a little bit of time to build up that pipeline. It took a little bit of time to become truly known for that thing. It took a little bit of time to get those foundation clients that you could grow with and build with, and to build your consulting frameworks around. And it just takes time for sometimes that hardcore belief to come to fruition, and that thing that you envisaged, that for it might take a year, it might take 2 years, it might take 3 years to come to life. But if, like you said, I like that term that you said, staying the course. I think it takes a lot of grit to be able to stay the course, despite the fact that it takes a little bit of time to see that fruit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that online, when it comes to e-commerce businesses and brands, the fact that there's 276 million Americans shopping online every single day, we have access to an unprecedented amount of people. The way that you get people's attention is by being very specific. You don't get their attention by being wishy-washy or vague. You get someone to click because they immediately see the value, they immediately feel seen, they immediately feel like you get it. So, no, I think but it takes a lot, like you're saying. Also, I find with my founders and the clients that I work with, to get them to stay the course as well, to get them to stay the course in their business, to get them to not get nervous or not want to do other things because they look around and they see other businesses or other founders are doing XYZ, and then they want to start doing it. And I think that more people fail as a result of shiny object syndrome, as I call it, than anything else, because niching down requires consistency. And sometimes it's also boring, right? It's getting up every day and doing the same thing and being in the same lane. And I think that's also like a skill set that needs to be developed.
Yeah, true grit is something that's not common. It's uncommon in society nowadays. People want the quick wins, they want the instant gratification, they want to see results yesterday. And anything worth having is worth fighting for, I think. And so when you go into work with these D2C brands for the very first time, they've reached out to you, you've connected with them through your network or whatever, and you're just getting into their business. Is it a process of auditing what's working, auditing what's not, making strategic recommendations? Where do you usually begin with the brands that you work with? Where's like that? How do you level set when you first start working with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. So definitely with a business that is alive, because sometimes I'm working with businesses pre-launch. If a business is already alive, the first thing that I do is 100% evaluate what is. And that is a process where I audit, I analyze, and I ask a lot of questions. I need to understand like the reality versus what they think. Sometimes founder or business owner will give me a whole spiel of what their business is doing. And then when I get in there, those things are not necessarily aligned. So I think that the evaluation is where we begin. From there, I normally then have to backpedal into, okay, what's the vision? What are we actually trying to do here? And what is the strategy? Oftentimes, I find that those two things aren't necessarily connected. People have a vision, but they don't have a strategy that can bring the vision to life. And when I think of growth in a perfect world, it's vision and strategy are getting set up over here. Strategy is going to encompass your plan. It's going to encompass everything that you're going to do, who you need, all of that kind of stuff. Then we go into the mode of evaluating what we have done, the results that we're getting, and teaching them and helping them and giving them the frameworks to be able to do that. Because as a business owner, if you are incapable of evaluating your own business, auditing your own business, you don't understand what to look for, then you are going to always be dependent on somebody else. And you might not like where you end up going because somebody else might have a different way of auditing your business. And so I think it's really important I advocate for self-sufficiency, not just in terms of the business model of D2C, but also in terms of humans and people. The more self-sufficient we are, the more power we have, the more freedom we have. And then if I'm still working with them on the execution part, we're fine-tuning basically what we did in the audit, and we're making sure that we're monitoring the plan, we're making sure that we're acting on it. But that's the general format, and that this cycle kind of repeats every single year, because every single year we have to have a new vision of what we want to achieve in the next 12 months, and we're going to need a new strategy to be able to get there. And so it's just like this never-ending cycle of growth.
And what's cool about this, I think that you said something that was really interesting there. There's sometimes a disconnect between the vision and the reality, but I think that's almost a prerequisite for being an entrepreneur in the first place. We all have to be a little bit delulu to want to go into this crazy thing called entrepreneurship. And so I think that the fact that you recognize that as an entrepreneur yourself, and the fact that you've helped entrepreneurs, we all have to be a little bit freaking not quite right in the head to want to stick with this whole entrepreneurial thing. Because I think unless you're a little bit crazy, you will give up, because it's a hard road, and it requires long-term persistence, grit, commitment. Like, you have to really want the thing to get the thing. Like, I don't know too many businesses out there that lucked into it. Okay, maybe occasionally there's a creator that had a post go viral or something like that, and they found success overnight. And they built a personal brand off the back of that, and then maybe they created some merch and they're off to the races. But those are the extreme exceptions in my experience. Like you have to be in it to win it. You have to be playing the extreme long game in business to be able. For most people, they're not going to be an overnight success. What is that saying? It took 10 years for me to become an overnight success. This is just such a normal thing in entrepreneurship. And so I think helping entrepreneurs, which tend to be natural visionaries anyway, they've got a vision of something that they want to create in the world, but someone like you who can keep them grounded in some sense of reality, strategy, and a pathway to get there, I think that being able to reconcile those two things feels super critical to what you do.
1,000%. I agree with you. Most of them are visionaries. Most of them love the creative. Most of them love the possibility. Most of them are seeing a huge vision. And so part of that is like coming down to being like, okay, we get the big vision, but what's the vision for the next 12 months? Like we have to be able to operate two visions simultaneously.
Or for the next
and in the next
quarter,
12 months,
financially, what are we going to do for the next quarter?
Yeah. And we can only win at three things. So that's the other thing. I'm like, there's realities to our resources. And when resources, it's time, it's focus, it's people, it's money. Like you can only win at three things. We cannot win at everything. So are you ready to commit to these are the three things that I'm going to do, this business is going to achieve in the next 12 months? Sometimes it's not always easy because sometimes there is a lot of resistance to wanting to have a strategy. There is resistance to the reality of what things cost or the reality of what it's going to take. And so now I'm at a point where I don't fight people. Like I'm going to tell you what is. If you don't want to do anything with that, then no problem. I'm not the person that can help you, because I think it's very important that we have a conversation about what is reality and what is achievable. And then we don't set up to fail. We want to set up to succeed. And so there's only so many levers that we have. Do we have to slow down growth in order to do it profitably? Do we have to make decisions in terms of where we're going to put our resources so that we are constantly just going towards those three things that we want to win at? And I think that founders that are unable to focus or have a really hard time wanting to have a real strategy or a real budget, it doesn't work. Wow. Right? It doesn't work. You need both of those things in order to be able to move forward and grow.
Yeah, and I think it's also a case of, I've always felt that one of my key roles as a consultant is telling a business where their baby's ugly, right? And that's a hard thing to do because oftentimes there's no one in the business that's an employee of the company that is willing to do that because they put their job on the line when they do. And so therefore, as an external third party who's coming in, they're asking me to disrupt their business because they're not happy with where it is. That's why they brought me in. And so as an external third party that's as impartial as you can be, you are there to call out the areas of both strength and weakness, but really focus in on the areas that need improvement and be able to identify those pretty quickly so that you can move the needle pretty quickly. And I think you're not comfortable having hard conversations with clients. I think it's difficult to be a consultant. What's your thoughts?
Oh, I don't think you can be a consultant. I think that you can be a solopreneur, and I think that you can work in a certain area of the business, but I don't think that you can be stepping into a role where you're managing founders and working with founders or business owners if you are unwilling to say no. Yeah. Many times, if you're unwilling to tell them that their baby's ugly, this is what we need to change. Like I've walked into businesses and I've been like, okay, if you want me to work with you, we need a new website, we need new assets, we need new photography, we need new branding. Are you in or out? It's going to cost you this amount, like yes or no, because without that, I can't move forward. So I think managing founders and business owners is a skill set. I think it takes a lot of emotional maturity. I think it takes a lot of confidence. I think it takes a willingness to sometimes allow things to come at you and know that it's not personal, right? Because you're dealing with their fears, you're dealing with their mindset, if they're founders that have bootstrapped or raised capital, there's all sorts of different things that go into their psychology. And I don't think that most digital marketers or most people working in e-commerce can do that.
And how often are you brought in to provide air cover for the business to do the things it already knows it needs to do, but it needs permission and it needs the mandate to do it? And sometimes it's easier for an outside third party to come in, and maybe they've got a, I don't know, maybe they've got a marketing manager, or maybe they've got a head of paid and performance, or they've got a head of brand, or whatever it is, head of customer, and they know what needs to be done. They know. They've got experience. They're good at their jobs. They know what needs to be done. But either the founder or the owner or the leadership or whatever just needs that little push. They need the permission. They need the validation. They want to effectively offload the risk to an external third party. Is basically they want the air cover to do the things that they know they need to be doing already. They just need someone to come in and say, yep, you're on the right track. You absolutely need to do that, and here's the steps we're going to do to get there. How much of that is involved? Because for me, that's a huge part of what I do. It's providing air cover for these businesses to do the right things that they already know they need to be doing, but they've just never pulled finger and actually done it.
Yeah, I think it depends on the business. Some businesses are very clear, and some founders and owners are very clear. I don't know D2C, or I don't know how to do this, and I need to bring in somebody that does, right? That's a great place to be, because there's already like an admission of, I'm waving the white flag, I need help, right? Sometimes there are other businesses where they have great retail businesses, or they have great wholesale businesses, or they have great Amazon businesses, but they just are not doing anything in D2C. But they're not necessarily sure that they want to invest, or that they want to change their internal processes. And so sometimes it's more of them realizing, like, hey, this is what it's going to take if I want to actually have D2C as a channel that's working for me. And some of them decide, okay, yes, I want to do this. And some of them are like, this isn't the right time, or I'm never going to be able to do this. So I think it depends. Usually everyone's having a conversation because they're interested in the possibility. Whether they actually want to roll up their sleeves and implement systems and processes. And I also advocate for a model that scares a lot of traditional businesses, because like in e-commerce, there's incredible solopreneur talent. And I love people that are on their own, like that SEO, that media buyer, that graphic designer that's on their own, that has no guarantee of a paycheck, that is a master at what they do. That's incredible. I want those people working with me. They're the best. But that is not always a business model that makes, some companies feel good. They prefer employees, or they prefer people that are sitting in chairs there with them. And so there's also issues that I come across of, are you really willing to do what needs to be done and have the best team, the best in class team here, or not? So I know I didn't answer it specifically, because it's just like, there's so many different scenarios that I come across. You know what I mean? There's so many different scenarios that I come across. At the end of the day, it's, do you really want to do this or not? If you're serious and you really want to do this, I can give you the pathway there. If you are thinking you maybe want to do it, then I'm not the right person, because I don't want to sit around and watch you figure that out. I want to be with people that are high achievers, that want to go, that want to do, that want to build and create. And so those are the businesses and the clients and the personalities that I most work with, that are like, let's go.
Yeah, the term I use is, I never try to sell the unsellable. That's the term I use. So if I have to drag someone kicking and screaming towards an opportunity that I can help them with, that's not the right client for me. That's where I point them to my nearly 500 podcast episodes. That's where I point them to my content on LinkedIn. That's where I point them. If you're still on the fence about this whole digital thing, then hey, we're probably not going to be a great fit. But when you're ready to go all in, that's where I can help you really level up your game. With 25 plus years of doing this thing, I know what I know, and I stay in my lane. And I like, for example, I'm not going to come in and do what you do. For example, I'm not going to help them with marketing. I'm not going to help them with branding. I'm not going to help them with positioning. I'm not going to help them with go-to-market. I'm not going to help the brands with that. I'm going to help them with their tech, their ops, their people, their processes, and their data. That's what I'm going to help them with. And I'm very clear about that. I'm very clear about what I do, but I'm also very clear about what I don't do. And so therefore, but I can point them in the direction of somebody like you, for example, if they're wanting, I don't know, let's say they're a traditional B2B business and they want to up their game on B2B, but they also want to establish a D2C channel, right? I can help them with the tech aspects of that, but I'm not going to help them with the go-to-market of their D2C channel. And that's where I can recommend someone like you that's a specialist in that aspect of their business. And I'm not going to try to be the jack of all trades, because I know I'll fail at that. So I would rather really focus and niche down. Now, is there a a scenario where I know you one of your very famous taglines you call out: without Amazon, without wholesale, or without retail. Do you think there is room for some of these D2C brands to establish strategic wholesale channels? Now, what I mean by that is we've seen a lot of D2C darlings that grew up and exploded during COVID really struggling today. We look at Allbirds, nearly out of business, from D2C darling down to 90, 98, 99% share price drop since their initial IPO. We look at even vaunted Nike backtracking on their D2C plans, and they said, look, we killed off too many wholesale retail relationships, and we're going back and we're going to be in more retail doors than ever before. And we're going to have more retail partnerships than ever before. And from Casper to 8 Sleep to Peloton to every D2C darling you can think of that kind of exploded onto the scene during COVID, almost every single one of those has been forced into some form of strategic wholesale channel. Because as a D2C brand, no matter how big, no matter how successful, and no matter how much marketing money you have, you can't be in all markets, in all channels at all times. It's just impossible. And it's just so expensive. CAC is so high and rising in all D2C channels. What are your thoughts about D2C brands that have treated D2C as a business model instead of just a channel? What is your sense on that and your take on that?
I think there's multiple things. I think the first issue is like, how big is big? And I think that some of these businesses were just pushing growth at any cost, which, as we've seen, like, there is a bubble. There is maybe a point where this business can't do more. And maybe that's okay. What is success? How do we define success? And that's like a very big thing for me with the clients and with businesses. That's a really complicated topic because 1,000% I agree with you. There have been D2C brands that expanded too fast, pushed too hard, tried to do too much where there wasn't necessarily the market to give them that growth. And so then it just became a disaster because they started pushing into other channels without necessarily thinking about the ramifications of other channels. I think that there's a world where, having multiple models of business is tricky. I think that understanding who's the master is tricky. What is the most important thing for us is tricky. And I think that as someone who's done wholesale and retail and e-commerce and have had different masters of success in each one of these models, I can see how it gets really confusing for people. The best advice that I give brands when they're at that moment where they feel like I can't do any more in D2C, like I have tapped out. My first question is, are there other online markets that you could be expanding into, right? Because the online ecosystem works the same, and because it's 2025, and because now we're able to do so much more operationally, is the growth more about you expanding into other online markets? If they want to go wholesale, I just always raise my hand and I'm like, that's fine, but you just need to remember certain things. The minute you sell your product to somebody else, by law, you cannot dictate if they're going to mark it down, if they're going to put it on sale. Like, they own that product. They can do with that product what they want. They can sell it on the black market if they feel like it. So I think that you need to be at a place where either you have different lines of product for different business models, or you're trying to tap into different customer archetypes, and you've got very clear delineation in terms of who you're going to get if you're selling your product at Target versus who you're going to get in D2C. And then I think that you just have to do the scenario analysis of, can the business withstand this expansion without dropping the ball on what we have right now? Because that's, I think, what we've seen more than not is these D2C businesses that have expanded into retail and wholesale, everything's kind of become a problem, right? It's not like they've been able to maintain their D2C business strong. It's been like they did a retail rollout and then they have to pull it back because it didn't work, or they did a wholesale rollout, but now their D2C is not growing. So I think it's complicated. I think figuring out, again, like, you can't win everywhere. So if you can only have a couple of wins in each channel, what are those wins? And then having incredible clarity about that is the way that I would try to navigate it.
I love that answer. That's probably one of the best answers I've ever heard from anyone about how to approach a potential entry into strategic wholesale as a D2C brand. I love that answer. That was epic. That was very well reasoned. And there's nothing I can disagree with anything you just said. Makes complete sense to me.
Well, If you're going to go in, as someone who did wholesale, it's like that strategic partner. If there's a specific customer that you can get by being at Nordstrom that you can't get anywhere else, then how can you do it differently for them? How do you make it special for them? How do you make it so that it feels different than what you're offering over here? And I think there just has to be that clarity of separate both of these worlds, and the back to like the consistency and the discipline of what are we going to win at, and who's the master of each of these different things, right? That's where I think things get really messy and really blurred. People chase what they believe to be just like the initial top line growth, but then they can't sustain it. And then everything just gets confused and dulled, and you're not doing anything right, and you're not speaking to anybody anymore because you're not all in with anybody. You're trying to be for everyone, and then it's just a spiral from there.
Get lost in the noise, and that is the terrible place to be. Being mediocre is the death of being mediocre at anything is the death of any business. So if you can only be awesome at narrow thing, then go be awesome at that narrow thing. Don't try to be all things to all people, because you can't. So don't even try. That's what I think. So I totally agree with you there. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, what would be, if I'm a new D2C brand, let's say I'm pre-launch, right? I think I've got this great idea. I've got a contract manufacturer. I've got some designs. I've got a product rollout plan. I've got a solid MPD pipeline. I've got my business plan. I think I've got an idea of where I think I can be strong from a marketing perspective. What are the gut check things? Because I see every single day. I spend a ton of time on Reddit. And the amount of posts, I would say I see between 5 and 10 posts a day, and I can't even respond to them all, where people say, hey, I've started up this Shopify store. I've loaded up these products on it. I've gone to market. I've spent $10,000 on meta ads, and I've had 2 sales. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Can someone go and look at my website and tell me what they think? Like, the number of posts that have that scenario almost word for word, and the number of Shopify websites that come and go silently in the night and nobody ever knows is just phenomenal. And so what would be your 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice before someone goes and launches what they think is going to be the next famous world-beating D2C brand? What are the gut check things they should be doing before they ever go down that path of even subscribing to a $29 a month Shopify plan?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think today in 2025, go learn from someone, go get a mentor, go learn from someone who's actually done this already. I did not have that luxury in 2015. So I had to make a lot of mistakes. I burned through a lot of money that people don't have to do today, because we know so much more now about the ecosystem and the way that it works. And I think that a lot of people show up, and I use this analogy, like they show up to play tennis, but they're on a basketball court. And so they just simply don't have the knowledge of the game. They don't know the rules. They don't know the structure of it. And so before you launch, take a moment, take a breath, and go find somebody to help you, right? Like when you think about really talented people, Olympians, athletes, anyone that's achieved anything in their life, they all have coaches. These people can help you see the blind spots that you can't see. They can help you see the path, right? So I think that's the thing that I would tell everybody is go find that person that can show you the path so that you can show up to play the game properly and you can have a chance. Because if there's a lot on the line, why wouldn't you want to do that?
Yeah, and especially if you're looking at potentially pouring your life savings into this great new business idea, wow, I would definitely want someone with more experience than me to at least review my plans and poke holes in it and ask really difficult questions and at least allow me to go into this new venture as fully informed as I can possibly be, so that at least I know, okay, it's likely I'm going to need X amount of resources and X type of resources to get me through the next 12 months. Do I even have that? And I think these are really reasonable and fair baseline questions that we can be asking in the market. And that's getting wise counsel, full stop, I think is always a good thing, but especially if you're going into an area that you're not already an expert in.
For sure. And I would add to that also that e-commerce is an incredibly fragmented landscape of of information and misinformation. And so I think that it's also really important to get that advice from people who have launched businesses, that have scaled businesses, that can give you that holistic view. Because what I also find a lot of people doing is like, oh, I got advice from this person over here, but this person over here only knows this one part of the puzzle. They can't tell you anything else. And so you're going to walk in and follow this piece of advice, which might be true, but it's missing all of this other context that you need to have in place in order for that to be true. And so that in 2025, I just feel like there's no reason to not find people that have already done what you want to do and to get some learnings before you step on the stage to go play the game.
I love that. Hey, man, that is a brilliant finishing line. Couldn't agree more. Now, drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes and your website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to reach out to you, they want to chat all things D2C, they want to learn from your mistakes and your learnings along the way and potentially engage you for your services, what's the best way to get a hold of you and have that conversation?
I think LinkedIn is a great place. LinkedIn is the best place. But also, they can also reach out on the website. They can also send an email. I respond to every single email and I respond to every single message and DM. Yeah, I think I'm an easy person to get to for the people that want that advice or even knowing what could be possible in terms of mentorship or coaching with me.
I love that. I love that. Absolutely happy to put all that information in the show notes. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to hand the microphone over to you, flip the script, let you ask me one question, any question you like, and it can be personal or professional. Marissa Rodriguez, founder and CEO of Through Experience. What is your question for me today?
Wow. All right. I was not expecting this. Okay. Tell me, after 500 podcast episodes, what has been the greatest learning for you in talking to so many people and in putting this kind of content out consistently?
Yeah, look, that's a great question. And I think for me, I think there's two things actually. One is pod fade is a thing. The statistic I think is something like over 90% of podcasts never get past episode 20, and then something like 99% of podcasts never get past episode 50. So pod fade is a thing. So I think if you, and when I first started my podcast, it was a solo podcast. I didn't do interviews. I really just talked about what was based on my experience and my learnings at that point in time. And what I discovered is that's really difficult to be consistent with, and it's difficult to be sustainable with that approach because there's only so much. You might know a lot and you might have lots of experience, but there is still limits and boundaries to what you know and what you can share personally and individually. And that's why I pivoted to an interview style podcast, because I realized, there's a truckload of people out there that have smarts and knowledge and experience in areas that I just know so little about. And not only can I be educated by my guests, but my audience by extension can also be educated by my guests. Also, I found that it opened up opportunities to have conversations with people that you can't, it's almost impossible to have any other way. And I'll give you an example. So before I had a podcast, if I would slide into your DMs, for example, not in a creepy way, in a nice way, and I was to say, hey, look, we're in the same industry. It seems like we're doing kind of similar things. Can we grab a 15-minute virtual coffee together and talk shop, right? 9 times out of 10, you're going to say no because you think I'm going to try to sell you something, or I'm going to try to do business with you, or whatever you might think, but it's probably not. You're not going to assume that it's as innocent as let's just talk shop. Whereas when you have a podcast and all of a sudden you can say, hey, it looks like you're doing some really amazing things in the industry. You seem like an interesting person that I would like to have a conversation with. Would you like to come on my podcast and talk about XYZ thing? That's a much easier thing to ask, and you'll get a much higher yes rate to that than just sliding randomly into somebody's DMs and say you want to talk shop with them and pick their brain, whatever. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that I have discovered over 486 or whatever it is podcast episodes now, man, there are people that are super freaking smart in every single subtle little nuance of this space. There are people that specialize in the most random niche things that you like. If you can imagine it, there's somebody that specializes in it. It's crazy. And they just oftentimes don't have a way or a platform or an environment where they can talk about that thing. And that's one of the reasons why I started this podcast, was to give those people a way in which they can share their knowledge with the world. Because I am a massive believer in sending the ladder back down again. This industry has been badass and amazing for me in my life. It's created a lifestyle for me and my family that I could have only dreamt of 25 years ago. And I am eternally grateful to my industry because of that. And if I can extend that gratitude to giving other people a platform to talk about what they love and are passionate about, then I'll feel like I'm doing something good for my industry and giving back in some meaningful way.
I love that. I feel the same way. I feel the exact same way. That's so cool. And that's such an amazing place that you arrived to. So thank you for sharing that.
My pleasure. Listen, thank you so much for your time, and I really appreciate that, and I can't wait to speak to you again soon. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.